and will be posted to our website within a day for you to download in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce your speaker today, your facilitator, Dr. Douglas Reeves. He is the founder of Creative Leadership Solutions and the author of more than 40 books and 100 articles on education, leadership, and student achievement. Doug and the Creative Leadership team are providing free webinars for teachers, leaders, parents, and students around the world. Doug.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Tony, for all your support on this. We've got a great crowd. And as we said, not only are we going to record this and we'll make that available to you, but we also share our handouts and our research freely. You might have participated in professional learning seminars where people get all cranky about copying handouts. We're not like that. Research is there to be shared, and we want to make sure that you have access to all of this. Moreover, if you look at the very first page of your handouts, you'll see that not only is my contact information up there, you can tweet at Douglas Reeves, but my personal cell phone number is there, 781-710-9633. If you're calling from outside the United States, that's country code 1, then 781-710-9633. The reason that I put it up there is that there's no robots, no admins. It goes straight to me. And if you've tried it, you know that I really do answer my own phone, or if I'm tied up, I get right back to you as quickly as possible. So let's get underway. I want you to stop anytime, use the chat function for questions, and I want you to also think about representing the people who are not here. Maybe you're an administrator, think about classroom teachers. Maybe you're a classroom teacher, think about students and parents. I want to make sure that we have broad representation. And also, I want you to know that even if I can't get to all of your questions now, I promise you a personal response to every single question that you have to offer.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin with a quick activity. So if you would grab that cell phone or open up another web browser. If you choose to reply to our poll by text, please send a text to recipient 22333, that is 2 2s and 3 3s, with the message Creative Lead 764. You should receive a reply saying that you have joined our poll. Or if you'd like to join by browser, you may also do that on your phone or on a web browser on your computer. Simply navigate to pollev.com/Creative Lead 764. So sending a text, recipient 22333 with the message Creative Lead 764, or by web, pollev.com/Creative Lead 764. And our first question, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to know who's in the audience with us. So if you would please respond with your role. A for classroom educator, B for instructional coach, C for counselor or other support, D for building administrator, E for district, and F for county or state administrator.
And we'll give you a couple of minutes to let us know this. And we're also admitting new people who are joining us right now. So see you back here in 2 minutes. And just about 30 more seconds, please.
So it looks like predominantly district and building administrators, but great representation from classroom educators and instructional coaches, and a sizable chunk of counselors or other support and county or state administrators, Doug.
That's great to hear. Well, I promise that the content we're going to use this afternoon will be relevant to all of these roles, and I want to make sure that you, as I said, represent the constituencies that are behind you, but also represent the people who may be a little bit different from you. We value from divergent thinking. I also want to begin by offering some free resources to you. Although this webinar can be useful, we also have a lot of free videos, articles, and tools that you can download at creativeleadership.net. Some people appreciate having the free leadership performance matrix or mini observation rubrics for teachers. Others just want research or a video to start a lesson or start a department meeting or a professional learning community meeting. They're all available. Please help yourself to those. We also have many people who are finishing their dissertation, one of many activities to do during a pandemic shutdown once you've reorganized your closet. Just this morning, I got an email from somebody who said that they've gone through the finish the dissertation process and finished. So God bless them. So happy to have that be successful. And I want you to know that I'm very well aware that 69% of doctoral candidates never finish. So we started this process as a free, non-commercial way to help students across the globe finish their dissertation. If that's you, a colleague, or a loved one, just let us know. Go to finishthedissertation.org and we'll give you a hand. So here's what I'd like to try to get accomplished today. And I want to focus on standards, but there's some other issues as well that have come up that I always want to make sure that we respond to, as well as your questions throughout the entire time. And I'm going to insert, if we have some time, a response directly to a front page issue from today, and that's how are we going to respond to Black Lives Matter in a thoughtful and constructive way. We'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions as well. So let's get to work.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to know what's top of mind for you right now. So again, for those just joining, we are providing an interactive activity here using Poll Everywhere. You may join by sending a text to recipient 22333 with the message creative lead 764, or you may join by navigating to pollev.com/creative lead 764 with a web browser. And the question we'd like to know now, as you're coming into today's session, what are your greatest anticipated challenges for the year ahead? Greatest anticipated challenges for the year ahead. Please use one word per response. You may respond multiple times.
2 minutes, friends.
And Doug, a couple of responses coming in by chat: teaching and learning and work overload, particularly around standards.
About 30 more seconds, please. So we're going to be saving all these word clouds so that when you get the recording of this webinar, you'll have not only what I had to say, but what all of you collectively had to say as well. And it's pretty clear that safety and equity are top of mind for you. I promise we're going to make sure that we address how to do that and still meet the learning challenges that are ahead of us. Let's go to the next slide. So in the book, Equity and Excellence, published in 2020 by Solution Tree, I tried to synthesize the research that I think represents the latest and best evidence. Some of you know my work on high poverty schools in the past that were the so-called 90-90-90 schools. I updated that to 2020 and learned that these core competencies apply not only to successful high poverty schools, they apply to all kinds of successful schools. I studied public schools, urban, rural, suburban, charter schools, independent schools, international schools. And what I found is that irrespective of the demographic characteristics of their students, highly successful schools, schools focused on equity and excellence, had these things in common. Number one, they focus. And that's what this seminar is all about. We're going to talk about focusing the curriculum, not frantically trying to cover everything in the curriculum. We're going to also talk about focused leadership with only a few initiatives that will guide your work this year. Instructional effectiveness. I'm a big advocate of Kim Marshall's mini observation rubrics, and I'll make sure that we provide those, but I'm going to also provide some streamlined ideas. Let me also lower the blood pressure of administrators and classroom educators watching this. I'm not talking about new evaluation system, because frankly, I've never seen anybody get evaluated into better performance. I've seen a lot of people get coached into better performance, and that's what mini observations can do. Same with leadership effectiveness. We have the free instrument called the Leadership Performance Matrix, already approved in several states. And it's one of those things that allows you to coach and develop leaders at every level, from aspiring leaders to current superintendents. What we learned in the course of that 37-state research project on leadership was that the longer your tenure, the higher you go in the system, the more ambiguous and infrequent the leadership feedback that you get. We want to fix that. And by the way, just like everything else, that's free too. You don't have to pay a licensing fee. You don't have to pay annual fees. A lot of people are spending way too much money on leadership and teaching evaluation that is simply not worth it. Use these things and you'll save money and frankly have better results. We'll talk about effective feedback. And there's a parallel structure here. Feedback to teachers, that's got to be fair, and feedback from teachers to students, that's got to be fair and accurate as well. And finally, efficacy. Many of you have read and heard the synthesis of the evidence on this. You know, John Hattie has been talking about collective efficacy. Robert Marzano has talked about it. I've talked about it. Michael Fullen has talked about it. So the question is, if it's so darn good, what do we do about it? Here's what not to do. Don't hire the inspirational speaker to sing the efficacy song and do the efficacy dance. Everybody's doing that. Instead, what I want you to do is the following. Ask your colleagues, whether virtually assembled or in person, this question. What causes student achievement? That's it. What causes student achievement? And put their answer, each answer on a separate page. And some will say, well, it's effective teaching. And some will say home environment. And some will say it's access to tobacco and alcohol and drugs. And some will say checking all their social media at 3 o'clock in the morning and being sleep deprived. Just let them go for 10 minutes. What are the causes of student achievement? Then take a break, and here's what I want you to do. Organize those responses into 3 piles. One pile is stuff I can't control and influence. You know, if parents let them have access to alcohol and drugs, I can't control that. If they let them be up at 3 o'clock in the morning to check social media, I can't control that. That's pile 1. Pile 2, things I can influence. That's things like attendance, on-time behavior, and diffusing conflict before it starts. I can't always control it, but I can certainly influence it. The third pile, things I not only influence, but I control. The relevance of my instruction, the quality of my feedback, the immediacy and accuracy of my feedback. Those are all things we control as educators and leaders. So now you've got 3 piles. Stuff I can't control and I can't influence, things I can influence, and things I both control and influence. So back to efficacy. What's that all about? The second and third pile, influence and control, outweigh the first pile. I'm not pretending that there are not factors outside of our control. Of course there are. I'm just saying what you and I influence and control matters more. So don't go back and ask people, are you feeling efficacious today? Ask them, what causes student achievement? The results will tell the tale. Next slide. Now, before we talk about standards, we all know there's too many of them. That's why you're here. But I want to make this respectful request. If you ask your colleagues who are millennial teachers, they joined our profession since the turn of the year 2000, and you ask them, why do we have standards anyway? They're likely to say, well, it's all on account of No Child Left Behind. It's all George W. Bush's fault, and that's the hand we've been dealt for the last 2 decades. I understand why you feel that way, but it's just not true historically. The truth is, we started standards in the 1990s, not because of a federal mandate. We started standards in the 1990s in opposition to the bell curve, because ultimately there's only 2 ways to evaluate students. Compare them to each other, the bell curve. The world, to be blunt about it, bluebirds, robins, and blackbirds, choices of color, not an accident. That goes back to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And it was still that way in the 90s until somebody said, wait a minute, there's a better way to evaluate students. Instead of comparing them to one another, compare them to an objective standard. That is, after all, the way that we evaluate teenage drivers, brain surgeons, jet pilots. We don't ask who beat whom. We ask, Did you achieve the objective standard? And are the standards flawed? You bet. I've written very critical things about them. But I'll tell you this, if you hate standards, you're right back to the bell curve. So your job and my job is to acknowledge the flaws in standards, but not to reject them, to make them better. And that's what we're going to do this afternoon. Next slide. The fundamental assumption, and I'm really pleased that we have State Department officials on here because they've worked their brains out to try to get standards right. But here is the dilemma that they're caught in. It's twofold. Number one, they have students who need to be at a particular grade level. And so states, provinces, ministries of education internationally have articulated grade level standards, grade 4, grade 6, grade 8, and so on. And I understand the rationale behind that. But here's the issue. This was true in 2019. It's certainly true in the fall of 2020. Do you have some students who need more than one grade level? If I'm working on an assumption that every student needs one grade level, but I've got a sixth grader who needs grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6, then either I'm going to have class 24 hours a day or I'm going to have to narrow the focus because that fundamental assumption is flawed. Next slide. And our state departments, as hard as they work, are really caught between a rock and a hard place. They're created with a process of accumulation. And think about the political pressures that they're under. What every student needs to know, add this, add that. It's happened in the past. You better add this to the social studies curriculum. You better add that to the science curriculum. And I promise you, friends, what you're going to see this year is you better add this to the required reading list. People are a whole lot better at telling state departments what to add than they are telling them what to subtract. And so there we are left at the school level, at the classroom level, with more and more stuff being added. And yet we wind up not having nearly enough time to do what has already been dealt, let alone the new things that are being added. So what are we going to do about it? Next slide.
And Doug, as we begin to transition, a question from Derek. What do you say when your senior administration tells you that all outcome standards are priority based on your criteria? They are clearly not, but we're told otherwise.
I understand that, and I'm deeply respectful. You don't win arguments with senior administrators or policymakers or for that matter, with teachers. What I do think we can have is a reasoned dialogue. And the reasoned dialogue is this. If I can, there is a way to address every standard, and that's for me to talk really, really fast. So the question that I want to respectfully ask is there a difference between delivery and learning? Because I can deliver all the standards. I can deliver them real, real fast. But is there a difference between that and learning? And can we come to a consensus as professionals that our real interest is in learning, not merely in delivery? So let's take the next poll.
All right, so we'd like to know, folks, what you believe, what you've heard. We can't narrow the curriculum or the standards because A, it might be on the state test. B, the district requires that we cover all the standards, as I believe Derek has been informed. C, I have to get my students ready for the test. And D, we already have a process for narrowing the standards.
Take about 45 seconds, please.
And a couple of responses in the chat. C's and B's mostly coming in on the chat. So it looks like, Doug, almost half of our participants feel pressure to get students ready for the next grade, but almost 1 in 5 have a process in place already for narrowing the standards. But balancing that, an almost equal percentage feel that the district requires that we cover all standards.
So that's why we're here, friends. By a 4-to-1 margin, almost 80% of you say too many standards, not enough time. Only about a fifth say we have a process for narrowing the standards. And I know that I could learn from you on that. So please feel free to add your ideas. Let me share with you some of mine. Next slide. The cure is power standards. And that is not making my list. Sometimes people say, well, Doug, just give me the list. Tell me what they are. And I will give you a couple of examples. But there's great value in asking your faculty and curriculum leadership to apply these 3 criteria. Because when you do, you'll find out that the list is a lot shorter than you thought. Number 1, leverage. Let me illustrate with an example. I want to say if I push on this lever, what has impacts in many other directions? And that is the key. For example, nonfiction writing. If I push on that key, and I'm indebted to Stephen Graham, who has done brilliant research on this. I've tried to add to the pile a little bit myself. When you push on the lever of nonfiction writing, you get better results in reading comprehension, in mathematics, in science, in social studies. So to be clear, number 1, don't put that on the back of ELA teachers alone. We got to all own nonfiction writing. And number 2, don't let your pacing guide say, well, it's October, so we'll do informative writing now. No, we got to do it all year long. Tables, charts, and graphs are another example. I do that in my math curriculum, but we need it in science, we need it in social studies. In my worldview, you'd have every informative essay also be associated by a table, chart, or graph. Endurance. The mistake a lot of us make is we only look at our specific standards for our grade, but 4th grade colleagues, I'm appealing to you. You look at 4th grade standards and you'll see, along with a lot of other stuff like argumentative writing and claim evidence and reasoning. But if you'll take a few more minutes, you're going to see those same 4th grade argumentative writing, claim evidence reasoning in grade 6, in grade 8, in grade 10. That's endurance. When I can't cover everything, let's think of my obligation to my colleagues in future grades so that I'm really asking what standards recur again and again. And thirdly, essentiality. That is, what do we need for the next year of instruction? I'm asking every 5th grade teacher on this call to buy some virtual pizza for 6th grade teachers. Now, let's face it, when you're on Zoom, the price is right. So buy them some virtual pizza and ask this question. What do I need to do with my students this year so that they can enter your class next year with confidence and success? You want to know what those 6th grade teachers never say? Doug, you better cover every single 5th grade standard. They give me a list that's brief and focused. I'm asking every 8th grade teacher on this call, please buy some virtual pizza for a 9th grade teacher and ask them, what do we need to do in 8th grade to send them to you in confidence and success? Because I'll tell you what, I was an 8th grade teacher, taught at every level from elementary through postdoctoral students. And you want to know what? 8th grade teachers are driving themselves crazy, playing curriculum whack-a-mole, trying to do all this stuff, when if we just ask a 9th grade teacher, they wouldn't say, cover every standard. Now, 8th grade teachers' hearts are in the right place. I got to get them ready for high school. But if you ask our high school colleagues, what do you need? They'll say, it's a few things. I'll give you examples in a minute. And they also kind of resolve the standards paradox. It's not just the academic stuff, Doug. They'll say, send me kids who can keep an assignment notebook. Send me kids who can take a project, break it down into steps. Send me students who can ask for help before it becomes a crisis. So you'll have this neat combination of academic standards and behavioral standards that's a lot fewer than you think they are. Next slide. Let me give you a couple of examples, because the devil is always in the details. And I'm going to ask you if you are or have been an 8th grade or a high school math teacher, really keep me honest on this and use the chat function to let me know if you think I'm okay. Because if I'm an 8th grade teacher and I'm giving advice to a 7th grade teacher who's trying to do 35 or 40 things, I'm going to say, stop the craziness and do these. 7th grade colleague, send me students who can do number operations with and without a calculator. And they should have had that in 4th grade. Sure enough, they should have, but they don't, because I'm getting too many kids who can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And by the way, don't tell me it's too late to do mental math. They need to do mental math without a calculator in order to have tests of reasonability. Have them do tables, charts, and graphs. Make them sing and dance, that they both understand a table, chart, or graph that they see, not just in my math class, but in science and in social studies, and that they can create them. Fractions and decimal operations. Well, darn it, Doug, they should have had that in 5th grade. Yeah, sure enough. But I've had too many pre-calculus teachers tell me that kids don't do fractions and decimals. I can't teach high school trigonometry if they don't have fractions. So please, for goodness sake, do those. Triangles and rectangles. If you can do those, you'll figure out every irregular polygon that there is. And I know, I left out the rhombus, I left out the trapezoid. I understand that. Give me kids who master triangles and rectangles. They'll figure the rest out. Measurement. And collaborate with my science colleagues on on this as well. Linear, area, volume measurement. Tell me the units that you want to use, sometimes metric, sometimes English. When I'm doing cubic measurements, make sure that I'm using the exponents that go along with cubes, and area measurements, the exponents that go along with squares. Let's use this as an opportunity to reinforce what I'm going to use in math and in science. And English colleagues, social studies colleagues, need your help on this. Given a story problem, write the equation. And maybe the story problem comes from math, but maybe it's from a population distribution in social studies, and maybe it's from an equation in science. Given a story problem, write the equation. And here's how writing happens in math. Given an equation, write the story problem. So if I can do those two things, I'm golden. Now, here, I'm going to pause for a second and ask you to go into the chat function. If you've been an 8th grade math teacher or a high school math teacher, tell me if you're okay with these 6 things. I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. So thank you for these really thoughtful responses. A lot of you are pretty darn happy with these. And you suggest quite rightly that we add statistics. I would argue that in college preparatory classes, students are much more likely to use statistics than they are calculus. But I can tell you, as somebody who taught statistics at the university level, they won't get to first base if they don't have these things first. So there is a matter of prioritization and sequence, and it is a gift to an 8th grade math teacher. I would argue a gift to a high school trigonometry, geometry, pre-calculus teacher, to have students who can master these things rather than be superficially exposed to 40 things. Let me give an elementary example. Take a look at the next slide. And again, I'm going to ask my 5th grade teachers to keep me honest on here. Here's what I want to happen in 4th grade ELA, mindful of the fact that there's a ton of stuff on your plate for 4th grade English language arts. Number 1, read a grade level story, poem, and nonfiction essay, and just write an accurate summary. Not asking for a term paper, 20 minutes, 1 paragraph. Just tell me what you read about. In fact, I know teachers during independent reading time that are doing 15 and 5. Instead of just 15 minutes stare at a piece of paper, 15 minutes read alone, and then 5 minutes, what'd you read about today? If they can't fill that in, that is a cry to tell me this student needs help in independent reading. Have them read aloud. Oh, gee, isn't 4th grade a little old to be reading aloud? No, it isn't. We need to be reading aloud in middle and high school as well, with expression, with understanding. Because I've been in too many classrooms where kids during independent reading time are holding a book, but it's not sustained silent reading. It's sustained silent sitting. I need to have them read aloud. Write an argumentative essay. That starts in 4th grade, one of the most important high leverage standards that they can do. And choose a claim and give me opposing evidence for it to explain your position. Check out a book from the library or even virtually. Here's the problem that's been happening during the shutdown. And many of you I know have invested a lot of time and energy giving students these computer-based libraries that they can have. But I've watched students during independent reading time. Some of them make a quick choice and are reading and love it. But you want to know what other students do? Here's the device you gave them. And for 20 minutes, they scroll through one after the other, and they never stop and read. So I want to help them be able to choose a book. And we're underusing our Library Media Center specialists here to really help us resolve this paradox of choice. Barry Schwartz at Swarthmore is the one who invented that phrase. And he said, we all benefit from having some choice that keeps us engaged. And that's true for 3 or 4 or 5 choices. Once you got 30 choices, and I've been in schools where kids have got 50 choices, they become paralyzed and choose nothing. And finally, read a newspaper. Social studies teachers, I need your help here. Don't just put this in the back of ELA teachers. Give me some authentic newspaper editorials and ask students to choose the author's point of view and where it might have come from. Now, these are the things that I want my 4th grade teachers to do. It's a far cry short of the 30 or 40 things they're asked to do. 5th grade teachers, middle school teachers, tell me, Are you okay if I can have my fourth grade students do this? Take about 30 seconds and reflect in the chat room. And Kim, can I just offer some really specific affirmation on writing paragraphs? I was in a school district that I really respect and admire, and there I was watching first grade students write multiple sentences, third grade students writing paragraphs. And then I went to the next class and all they had was Post-it notes. And the person said, remember, same kids, same neighborhood, same parents. Oh, they're not ready for paragraphs yet. That is a reflection of our expectations. And everywhere I go, don't tell me kindergarten kids can't hold a pencil. They can. I've watched it. Don't tell me first graders aren't ready to write sentences. I admit with pretty inventive spelling sometimes, but we can do this. And as you have so thoughtfully said in this chat room, I'd love it if my fifth graders could just write a paragraph. You focus on these things, we'll get it done.
Yep.
You tell me that we can only do this during argumentative writing time in October, we won't. Tony, I need you to mute everybody.
Think I got it.
Okay, I'm back now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so next slide. I want to divert for a moment and talk about the issue that is facing many of us, and that's teaching Black Lives Matter. This is really not a diversion because I think this is at the heart of literacy. It's at the heart of prioritized curriculum. It's the heart of critical thinking that is all over our standards. And yet teachers, administrators, board members, parents are telling me they're really bewildered about how do we deal with this. And friends, I'm asking your forgiveness, not permission, because I'll tell you, Anthony Muhammad, my friend, co-writer, and colleague, is telling me that people don't know how to do this. And in the absence of that, they're afraid to even talk about it. So the solution that we have is scenarios. It's a safe way to have discussions and make mistakes, ask for advice. And it's a way to identify also, we've got superintendents and state leaders on this call, to ask you respectfully for when the policy guidance we have so far, frankly, isn't very helpful. Let me give you 4 quick illustrations that I've been using around the United States where people are saying, I need to have the opportunity to figure this out. And if I don't, I need my superintendent and my state leaders to give me better policy guidance. Let's do the first one.
All right, so as we introduce these scenarios, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to know the extent to which you are currently using scenarios as a teaching tool. If you have joined our polls, you do not need to do anything at this point. If you have just or recently joined our webinar, then you may join the interactive activity here by either sending a text to recipient 22333, that's 2 2s and 3 3s, with the message creative lead 764, or you may respond by web navigating to pollev.com/creative lead 764. As Doug prepares to introduce these scenarios, we'd like to know the extent to which you use scenarios as a teaching tool. A, frequently. B, rarely. C, with adults only, not with students. And D, never.
Take about 20 more seconds. And thanks so much for your thoughtful response. About a third of you are using these, and I want to use that as a springboard because you've probably found, especially with younger kids, we use scenarios. Well, what would happen if this? What would you do if a friend said that? What would you do if a stranger said that? We use scenarios a lot for safety and other discussions. I'm suggesting scenarios are a great way for older kids and adults to proceed. Check out the following ones. The first scenario has to do with one that a high school student in Boston told me about. She said, look, this is a great school. You can go to 4 years of high school here and never read an African-American or Latinx writer. So she wrote an editorial for the school newspaper. And had a petition demanding that African American and Latinx authors be included as required reading. And everybody thinks, my gosh, isn't that a great idea? Thank God that students are participating actively in the curriculum. Wait a minute, the ELA faculty said. Number one, we already have African American and Latinx authors and a wide variety of other ethnicities on our reading list. If the students don't read them, that's on them, not on us. The faculty have already done their job. And number two, if you make them required instead of optional, then what are we supposed to take off? We can't just do more and more and more. I don't know the answer. You decide, because that's something your school is going to be faced with. Number two is a tough one. Student drama department comes to you, and next slide. Student drama department comes to you and says, we've created this play. We've rehearsed it. We produced it, and it's called The Last Hours of George Floyd. We want to present it in a school assembly because we believe that the catalyst for Black Lives Matter most recently was the murder of Mr. Floyd, and we want our faculty and our student body to be aware of it. And they've poured their heart into this thing, and they want to present it on stage. And you want to respond to encourage these students, and then students and parents come to your office and say, wait a minute, that play has got extreme violence, it's got abusive language, and we don't want it on school grounds. We don't even certainly don't want it during the school day, and don't want it required for our students to have to listen to. You're the leader, you decide. Next scenario. A lot of students have been protesting standardized tests. It's not just the SAT and the ACT. That's kind of old news because the racial disparities and the economic disparities on standardized tests have been around for a long time. But now that people are more and more conscious of this, they want to suspend those tests. And they don't want you to do prep. They don't want you to administer them because doing so is complicit in racism, the students tell you. Other students, and I just heard this less than 2 hours ago, are demanding that we have more test prep during school hours because that's our students' option for scholarships and for college admissions. Two groups telling you different things. What are you going to do? Scenario 4. Blue Lives Matters assembly. This happened in a city near me where students' parents are police officers. And they said, we're really tired of hearing our parents being called murderers and racists and terrible names. These are our parents, and they're good people. And they believe in Black Lives Matter, but they're also police officers who are tired of being ridiculed. And we want to have a Blue Lives Matter assembly. Seems reasonable, but other students come to you and say, wait a minute, you have a Blue Lives Matter assembly, and we're going to disrupt it, and your faculty is deeply divided. What are you going to do? Now, friends, I don't have smart answers for this. I am saying rather that as a teaching technique, scenarios are a way for you to, number one, talk things out with colleagues in a thoughtful environment, in a reflective environment. And if you make a mistake, make it in that sort of environment. And number two, to say, if we really don't know, superintendent, state leaders, we're asking you for policy advice because we're being pulled in different directions. And a sure way to make our community upset is to have 3 different principals making 3 wildly different decisions on these issues. Next slide.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask you to reflect on what you'd be willing to do with scenarios based on those presented to you by Doug just a moment ago. So again, directions for joining the poll are on the screen here. And the reflection we'd like you to respond to: A, this is an effective way to have challenging conversations in a safe environment for students and adults. B, we could try this with adults, but not with students. And remember, your responses are completely anonymous. C, the subject is too hot to handle. We can't discuss this in schools. And D, we don't have time for any new discussions like this. So again, you may join pollev.com/creative lead 764 or send a text if you have not joined already to recipient 22333 with the message creative lead 764.
And take about 30 seconds, please. And can I just say thank you for your honesty? I mean, 5 minutes ago, only a third of people were regularly using standards, and now 3 times that many are willing to do it. But you're also willing to say, hey, in some places, we're just not ready to use with the students. It's too hot to handle. And I just want to say, I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here to put this on the table as something that is going to come up. So the only question is, where is it going to come up? In our classrooms, in our professional learning settings, or is it going to come up in the parking lot? As Dr. Muhammad and I said in this book, we've never been at a protest rally where people shouting against each other said, well, gee, Marcus, that's a thoughtful point of view. What do you think? That's not what happens when people are yelling at each other. And I want to suggest our job is to create a safe environment for respectful points of view, an environment of civil discourse, which our students need and frankly, our nation needs. Next slide. So we talked about narrowing the curriculum focus and standards. Let's talk about you as leaders as well. And here's what I've learned, the rule of 6. Michael Fullen wrote the introduction to my study on this. And Dr. Fullen said, what Doug found was when you have more than 6 priorities, it's inversely related to student achievement. So I know a lot of you are inundated with, here's a program, there's a program, here's a grant, there's a grant. I'm asking you to focus it on 6 because you can't get more than that done. And what I've learned is when you say, well, Doug, I can't possibly narrow it down. Yes, you can, and here's how. Impact insight. It's how you save money by taking the initiative inventory. Now, I'm so happy that we have both administrators and classroom educators here, because here's what's happened to me. I'll go to the administrator and say, hey, we need to narrow things down. Oh, Doug, I know that research. We only have 6 priorities. And I say, yes, ma'am, but would you mind if I ask your teachers? And the teachers have 5 times as many priorities because they've got the leader's priority and your predecessors and your predecessors' predecessors. So please don't fall under the illusion that what your priorities are necessarily what our classroom colleagues think. There's a lot more of them. I know a principal who every year has what she calls the dumpster day. And in order to have her priorities done, she's got to get rid of some of those 20-year-old word searches and all the old literacy assessments and activities that are competing with what she's trying to do in literacy now. The number one complaint I hear from teachers is, we don't have the time. And one reason they don't have the time is that they're doing 3 different literacy programs at the same time. And administrators, I'm not going to let you off the hook here either. I know you all want to do looking at data and analysis of data, but I've been in meetings where they're using 3 different data analysis programs and people are drowning in it instead of one focused approach to data. Then have an implementation rubric. You want to do units of study, you want to do readers, writers workshop, you want to do fill in the blank here, that's great. But tell me what deep implementation means. Because level 1 is, well, everybody got trained. I bought the materials for everybody. That means nothing. Level 4 is, not only did we have materials and training and evidence of implementation in the classroom, and we have evidence at level 4 of impact on student achievement. There's a lot of level 1, everybody got trained, very little in the way of level 4. And then I want you to pull the plug, assess implementation and impact. And I'll just give you 2 examples from my personal experience the last few weeks. A very expensive curriculum program that the district was paying a licensing fee for every single teacher. 4 teachers were using it. Another one was a discipline program, paying a license for every single teacher, only a handful of teachers using them. Friends, what we've got to be able to do is ask, if it's not being implemented and isn't having an impact on student achievement, pull the plug. Money is tight for everybody, but it's really important that the easiest budget cuts you make are things people are not using. Next slide. So here are some things I'm hearing from your counterparts around the country. Here's their not to-do list. I just heard today some wonderful administrators and teacher leaders say, we're not going to make verbal announcements anymore. It's primitive. Put them in writing. In fact, this was very clever. They said for every item on our staff meeting and cabinet agenda, so literally from the 3rd grade team to the cabinet room, agenda items end with a question mark, not with a period. Because the purpose of meetings is inquiry and deliberation, not just presentations. So they stopped announcements, they stopped presentations. No more technology programs that are not used by teachers. They stop downtime, way too much downtime in classrooms and meetings, waiting for a volunteer. Don't do that. Do what our first grade colleagues do, which is equity sticks. Call for response, and if you're not comfortable responding, you can phone a friend, but I'm not going to spend one more second begging and pleading for responses, either in a classroom or in a meeting. Please stop responding to texts and emails in 30 seconds. That doesn't make you responsive. It makes you inefficient. It makes you tell the recipient of that text, I was just sitting here. Nothing I do is very important. I had nothing to do except stop that classroom observation and respond to your text. And friends, if I could say with respect, it is insulting to the people you're observing when you look down and are answering your own text message in the middle of a classroom observation. Respond to emails and texts 3 times a day, morning, noon, late afternoon, call it good. You don't have to do it in 30 seconds. And here's the real sensitive one. Stop doing homework that doesn't represent an effective check for understanding. During this shutdown, one of the most frequent comments I get from teachers is, I'm up until 11 o'clock on Sunday night grading papers, and I don't even know who did it. Thanks, Khan Academy. And they might have copied it from a sibling, might have gotten it from the internet, but I don't know it's their work. So stop doing that. Why do we do homework? Because kids need practice. The most effective practice doesn't happen at home. Practice happens in class with immediate feedback and immediate checks for understanding. Next slide. So we can defeat initiative fatigue, and I think that there are some things that you can do to weed your own garden. I'm going to skip this for now, but I really want you to do this as a take-home project, and with your next meeting, not really at home, but in your next meeting, share with one another a task, a program that you can stop doing. Next slide. Let's skip this one, Tony. Okay, a couple of more quick items before we adjourn for the day. I am so deeply indebted to the teachers in this district because they're making a point not just about how they decrease the DEF ratio, they're making a point about how to change. Because too often what we do is this top-down change model, and what they did was bottom up, inside out. These 20-year plus veterans, very strong union members said, you know, Doug, you may be crazy, but let us give it a try. One was science, one was math. Here's what they did. They stopped using the average. They just said, let's use the latest and best evidence. And you know what? Last spring, nobody used the average because kids weren't there in March and April and May. Just use the latest and best evidence. They stopped using the 100-point scale that is toxic, ineffective, and mathematically wrong, and went to the 4-point scale. A, B, C, D, F. A is a 4, B is a 3, C is a 2, D is a 1, so on. And if kids are missing work, and a lot of them are, thanks to COVID, then the consequence is not an F or a 0. That didn't accomplish anything. The consequence is doing the work. And they created opportunity at home, over the web, and at school to get missing work done. This inside-out change model resulted in an 80 to 100% reduction in Ds and Fs. And by the way, improved performance because they had the same final exam. And by the way, they wound up having significantly fewer discipline problems, better classroom engagement, fewer tardies. These are things really worth considering. It's not really just about homework and grading. It's also about the way that we do change with pilot projects and teachers convincing other teachers, this worked for me, it worked in my classroom, work with our students. Next slide. And finally, I want you to really rethink what we're doing in terms of assessments this year. A lot of people are trying to sell you things that they're calling formative assessments. They're just not. When one researcher looked at a bunch of different meetings, they found that they're all claiming to be focused on formative assessment data, but I think a lot of these things are better called uninformative, because what the study revealed is when they're not saying what curriculum did they miss, what standards do they need to emphasize. They said rather, here's what's wrong with the kids. That doesn't accomplish anything. Remember pile 1, that's stuff I can't control. What we need to say is, what can I do to teach fractions, to teach decimals, to teach nonfiction writing in a more effective way? And in this particular study, only 15% of discussions were doing that. So before you call anything formative, ask, does it inform teaching and learning? Can I do it tomorrow? And if the answer is, I'll give you a score several $100,000 later and several weeks later, that's not formative. The best things we can do are very short and immediate turnaround that tell me, how can I use this information tomorrow to be a more effective educator? Next slide.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 polls to conclude, our time together. So again, if you're just joining, you may join the interactive activity by sending a text to 22333 with the message Creative Lead 764, or you may navigate to a web browser, pollev.com/Creative Lead 764. We'd like to know what you see as the greatest barrier to improved professional practices. Please use 1 word per response. You may respond multiple times.
Take about a minute, please. This is a really important question.
And Doug, a couple of responses coming in by chat, teachers, unions, associations, and accountability.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to make sure that all of you have got this word cloud, but I want you to really take it seriously, because it's a clue about, if I'm ever lucky enough to be in your districts, here's how I start the conversation. I don't go in with the minutia of policy and procedures and grading and that sort of stuff. I start just where you did, with time and mindset. It's so important that you had these things. When I dialogue with teachers, and that, by the way, includes union leadership that I've had great relationships with, we start with, if time is the #1 obstacle, how can we respect your time and create more of it? That's what leads us into power standards. That's what leads us into better use of homework. That's what leads us into better use of assessment and data analysis. Start by respecting people's time. That's how we stop waiting for volunteers and start using equity sticks and random calls, because it's more respectful of your time. Similarly on mindset, there's one mindset that says, you play the hand you're dealt. These kids were messed up before they came to me. Nothing I can do about it. And the other mindset is, hey, I'm not a potted plant. I'm here because I'm here to make a difference. And my best days as a teacher is when I saw students struggle, break through. And if I believe that that's my best days as a teacher, that growth mindset, not just for students, but for me, then if I believe in that, why in the world would I ever use the average? So I don't start with policy and details. I start just where you did, with time and mindset. And I think that's going to help you have much more constructive conversations in the future. Last poll.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your input there. Next poll, we'd like for you to look ahead. What is your greatest hope for the year ahead of us? Again, please use 1 word per response. You may respond multiple times, but what is your greatest hope for 2020, 2021? And I have a hard time saying 2020.
Take about 20 more seconds.
And Doug, as folks are responding here, Ellie sent in a question asking, do we have a list of questions that we could use with staff to talk about staying focused on academic progress and not getting off track on behaviors?
That's a great point. So give me just about 10 seconds to let people.
Very good.
Word cloud, and then I'll address Ellie's question, because it's a nice way to end our discussion today. Well, friends and colleagues, you've certainly given me my marching orders, because when I look at your greatest hope, that's what's going to guide my work in professional learning for all of you. And let's go to the next slide, because I want to give Ellie's question the thoughtful discussion that it deserves. How do you keep the discussions on track? You don't do it by keeping minutes. You don't do it by having grandstanding during professional learning or staff meetings. In fact, I have seen many, many administrators and grade level leaders and teacher leaders stop doing meetings because they weren't fulfilling the function that they wanted of inquiry and deliberation. What I have said is that I don't need minutes. I don't need you to write everything down. I just have 4 questions. The 4 questions that if he were alive today, Rick Dufour would be asking, and that is, what do we want students to learn? How do we know if they've learned it? What do we do if they don't? What do we do if they have? And I would even shorten that to the following 4 words that to answer Ellie's questions, here's all I want to hear in a meeting. Learning, assessment, intervention, enrichment. And even if you can't be at a meeting, principals, don't ask for minutes. Nobody's got time for that, and you don't have time to read it. But ask for a 4-line email. Learning, assessment, intervention, enrichment. And Ellie, the way that you corral the discussion is, if it's not one of those 4 items, I'm not going to be reading about it. I want to focus on those things. If somebody has a separate question they want to talk to me personally about, no problem. I'm always willing to listen. But in my group meetings for professional learning, it's got to be learning, assessment, intervention, and enrichment. That's where I focus, and that's what will help you be, back to the issue of time, most respectful of the time of your colleagues. As we depart today, let me just reiterate what I said at the outset. We are deeply committed at the Equity and Excellence Institute to providing support and service to you. That's why I put my personal contact information up there. As Tony said, we've worked in 50 states, in more than 40 countries. We are deeply committed to providing on-site work as well as virtual work in not only fields like today, but my colleagues provide support in special education, in equity, in assessment, in standards, in a wide variety of areas. And we would be deeply honored to have the opportunity to support your schools, your districts, and your states as well. Thanks so much for your engagement today. Have a great rest of the day. And remember, you can get all of these handouts and today's actual webinar at any time to share with your colleagues. See you later. Have a great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us and for your participation today. We wish you a great rest of the week. Stay in touch. Let us know how we may be of service and support. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Reeves.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reeves' team.
You are most welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.